Hey, Team Impact, Mr. Mill here. We're moving on here. Going to fire up the lights here, get into the command center, and get rocking and rolling on lesson 3 this morning. So anyway, make sure you have your packet out. And when we look at this, we're going to be on the number system, and we're going to be comparing and ordering fractions. You are going to need a calculator, so make sure that you grab yours, and I'll be using mine. Turn it on. Let's go ahead and turn it on right now, and let's go ahead and clear it. So let's hit the clear and the on button, hold it for 3 seconds, and it will say memory clear for you. Just kind of clean it up there, and we'll go from there. So let's get through this vocabulary here, and let's get to work. So um, hope you enjoy it. A fraction bar is a way to represent division, right? Division. This can be used to convert a fraction to a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator, or the top by the bottom. So, for example, when you look at this, it says a over 3 equals a divided by 3. And we also could write that as what? A divided by b. 3 over 4 equals 3 divided by 4, which means 3 divided by 4. First number is your dividend, second number is your divisor. The first number is your numerator, the second number is your denominator. So as you look at that, okay? Okay, let's continue on here. 3/5 means 3 divided by 5, which means 3 divided by 5, and that's what it means. 3, right, divided by 5. All right, so 5 divided by 4 means that we have 5/4. We have an improper fraction, okay? And 5 divided by 4 is written this way, and we could write it as 5 divided by 4. 1 divided by 3 is written as 1 divided by 3, and could be written as 1/3. So it's just 1 divided by 3. 3 divided by 2. We're going to work backwards here a little bit. So we're going to set it up like this. 3 divided by 2 is written like this, and that's also going to be an improper fraction. Okay, so the top number is going to be greater than the bottom number. All right. So anyway, let's go ahead and continue on. Just a little bit of vocab for you, kind of getting you set up here. We're going to start with the calculator. Now, I will tell you this. Some of you are going to know some of these fractions, the decimal value, okay? But I'm going to show you how to do it on the calculator. It's pretty quick. We know that the first one is equal to 5/10. We're going to convert the fraction to a decimal. So let's get into this thing because it's going to save us time, okay? And we're working on ordering and comparing them. So let's enter it. So to enter a fraction, I hit 1, and I'm going to hit this n over d button, all right, numerator over denominator, and I'm going to hit 2, and I'm just going to go to the right and get it out of that function. So now my cursor is blinking over there. And then if I just hit enter, it goes to 1/2. Now, what I'm going to do is hit the second function of that same button. So I'm going to hit second n over d, and it's going to take the fraction to the decimal or the decimal to the fraction. If you hit enter, and there it is. It equals 5/10. Okay. So 9/10 is one that you probably know as well. It's 0.9, but let's go ahead and prove it. So we have 9 n over d, 10. We're going to go to the right. So now I have the fraction, so you can see it there. And then to change that, I'm going to hit second. I'm going to use that button again, n over d. So I'm going to go fraction to a decimal, and there it is. It's 9/10. And just write that down. Okay. So not too bad so far. 2/3 is the next fraction to a decimal. So let's clear it. Let's hit 2, n over d, 3, and go to the right. I've entered the fraction in. Now, this is going to be a special decimal because 2/3 and 1/3 are repeating decimals, along with an infinite amount of other fractions. But let's go, these are pretty common fractions. So again, hit second n over d, and it's going to take that fraction to a decimal. So you're going to notice that we have 0.666667. And what your calculator is doing at the end is rounding. All right, so we're just going to write it as 6/10, and we're going to put it in bar notation. And bar notation just means those sixes will go on forever, ever and ever. They'll never stop. The 6 repeats. I am not going to write the 7, however, because the calculator did it on its own. Because it ran out of space, it rounded. Okay. Next one up is 7n over d, 4 to the right. And if I want to change that, I've got to do that. So since it was an improper fraction, we get a whole number with it and a decimal, right? And a decimal. So I want to write the entire rational number down, right? 1 75/100. Okay. Okay. So pretty good stuff. Calculator's helping us out tremendously. Let's move on. Okay. Fractions can be placed on the number line. Or converted to a decimal to help order them. All right. So sometimes I know where these are, like 3/4 or 1/4 or 1/10. Others I may have to switch them to a decimal. So it's just going to be how I visualize these numbers, or how I recognize them, or my number sense, I should say. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch 2/5 to a decimal, and you'll notice that 2/5 is a decimal is 4/10. So I'm going to come in between 0 and 1, and what I like to do sometimes is label 0.5. Okay, so 0.4 is just going to be a little bit below that, and we're going to label that as letter A. So that gave me kind of a landmark to work off of, right? Next one is negative 3 1/4. I'm not going to worry about the negative. I know it's a negative sign. So I'm going to take negative. Now, 3. Now, to enter 3 1/4 into your calculator, what you're going to have to do is use a different button. So we use this for the fraction. Now we're going to use the UN over D, the unit, numerator, and denominator. So if I hit that, look what happens. It pops right up for me. And I'm going to hit it 1, down arrow, 4, to the right. Okay. And then, all right, if I hit enter, you'll see there it is. But I want to change that to a decimal. So the same function applies, and I get 3 25/100. 3 25/100. But it's a negative, don't forget. So we're going to go back to negative. So again, what I'm going to do is put a tick mark at 0.5 as my reference mark. And I know 25/100 is directly right in the middle in between the 0.5 and the -3, and I'm going to list it as label B. Now, let's try and do letter C without a calculator. If I took this and I split this up into 10 equal pieces, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, you would see that I could find 2 1/10 very easily. All right, 2 1/10 is 2.1 as a decimal, and I'm going to put a letter C there with that. Okay, so we can kind of do that when it's simple fractions that we can count out, and we know it goes in between a certain area. We can put tick marks and put intervals down. Letter D, 2 3/5. Okay, well, I put the tick marks down, so let's go back to the calculator and enter it. 2 UN over D, right? 3, down arrow, 5. And there is our mixed number. I'm going to do the same function, and I'm going to get 2 6/10. So I know 2 5/10 is right there in the middle. So 2 6 is going to be about right there. And again, I'm just kind of guesstimating where those go, but it is pretty accurate. All right, so the last one. Let's try and do this last one without a calculator because, all right, it's a fourth. Think of fourths as a quarter. 1/4 is a quarter. 2/4 a half is 50 cents, 0.5. 3/4 is 75 or 0.75. I know it's a negative, so I do. So in between these, so here's 0.5, and up there is going to be 0.75 or 3/4. So I'm going to put a plot right there. I'm going to put the letter E, and we're going to roll with it. Okay. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. All right. So it's a good start. Again, calculator is really going to help you out with these. Okay. All right, let's continue on. Fractions can be compared using like denominators. All right, we're going to find the LCM, the least common multiple, which is really the least common denominator. We're going to rename the fraction. So we're going to have to change the denominator and the numerator, and then we're going to order them. Now, this is one effective way, all right, and we're going to write the original fractions, but this is an effective way. So what they're doing, let's take a look at this. I personally use both methods. I will actually change them to common denominators and then rewrite them. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll use decimals here. I'll go to a decimal, okay? So with that being said, this one's pretty easy. I can look at these three and see my common denominator is going to be 12. Okay. So I'm going to come underneath it and write 11 twelfths and draw a line. To get that to 12 is times 4. That times 4 is 8. To get that to 12 is 2 times 2. That times 2 is 10. We're just renaming these fractions with a common denominator, and I'm separating them with a line. To rename this one is times 3 is 12, and that times 3 is 3. Okay? So we want this greatest to least. We always highlight, underline, circle that. They'll try and trick us, okay? Now, what I'm looking for is the biggest numerator. The biggest numerator is 11 twelfths, which the original value was 11 twelfths, and I like to cross that off. The next biggest one was 5 6 because it was 10 out of 12. But I'm going to write the original value down of 5 6. Okay. The third one was 8 twelfths, which was 2/3. And then finally, the last one is 1/4. So that's what we're looking at there with the common denominator. Okay. And when they're very compatible, what I mean by compatible is we could look and see that, hey, the least common denominator or the least common multiple of these four numbers is 12. Go ahead and go with that. And clearly, I can see the common denominator here is going to be what? 20. So I'm not going to use my decimal value. We're just going to stick to the fraction value, okay? So let's rewrite all of these with the denominator of 20 times 4 times 4. Okay, there it is, times 5 to get to here, times 5. That's already 20. I'm going to rewrite it. And to get that to 20 is times 4. And what I'm going to do is just grab my calculator. Since I have it, might as well use it, right? 17 times 4 is 68. All right. But the problem is I've got what? I've got 3 mixed numbers and an improper. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to switch that 68/20 to a mixed number. And I'm just going to go ahead and enter that into my calculator. And when I go to the right, there is that fraction. That is that. And if you just hit enter, let's see what happens. Oh, it gives it to us as a mixed number. So I'm going to rewrite that underneath. That is 3 8/20. Okay. Now, that down arrow just means that it needs to be simplified, and I'll show you that later. All right, greatest to least, they're all the whole number of 3, so now I compare my numerators, and there it is. The original value of that was 17/5. I'm going to cross it off. The next biggest numerator is 3 1/4. So I'm going to write it down and cross it off. The next one after that is 3 1/5, and then 3 3/20. Okay, and there it was. So there is some work, even with the calculator, so there is. All right. Okay, so let's continue on. And I used a pencil there in case I needed to erase. All right, let's rock and roll on here. Okay. There's a lot to this now, okay? So order the following fractions from least to greatest and use the number line to help. Well, Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, since I'm dealing with fractions, is I'm going to find the halfway point and put a half and put a half. That's a negative a half, and this is a positive a half. If it's a positive, we don't write plus. No, we just leave it alone. Now, when I look at these, okay, these are a little bit different. The common denominator here, well, probably going to be something very big. All right, so what I'm going to do is a little bit different technique. I'm going to change these to a decimal. I clearly know that these two are the smallest because they're negatives. But remember, the bigger the negative, the smaller it is. And I know just from practice that this is negative 0.5. But I'm not quite sure about 1/4. So I'm going to enter it into the calculator and I'm going to change it to a decimal. And I find out that it is 0.25. So I'm going to write that value under in here, but don't forget to preface it with a negative. So clearly, we can see that negative 1/2 is the smallest, right? So we're going to order these from least to use a number line to help. There it is, negative 1/2. And then what's next? Well, I'm going to get rid of that. I only have one other negative, negative 1/4. I'm going to get rid of that. So now we're going to compare these two decimal or these two fractions. All right. Well, I did 2/3 earlier, and I knew 2/3. Remember, it was 6/10 repeating. 6 is forever. And 3/5, I actually did it earlier. All right. But, okay, I'm going to do it again for you. And I'm going to change it to a decimal, and there it is. And it's 6/10, 0.6. So this is kind of tricky here, isn't it? Which one of these is greater? Well, after this 6 is a bunch of zeros. After this 6, the 6's go on forever. So this is going to be bigger than that. So 2/3 is going to be bigger than 3/5. So the next fraction is 3/5, and the final one is 2/3. So I did use my number line to help me a little bit, okay? And when we get to the negative numbers, we need that sometimes. Let's continue on. Order the following rational numbers from least to greatest. Well, I see that these two are negatives. So I'm going to change those. And it's going to be an easy one. The common denominator here is going to be 12. So let's rewrite those with a denominator of 12. Okay. So times 3 times 3 times 4 times 4. So now I have negative 1 and 4/12, negative 3 and 3, negative 1 and 3/12. So when I look at this, I'm going to go ahead and put a tick here for negative 1 right in the middle of those. That's going to help me. So now, if I went back here, and remember, this one is this one, right? If I went back here, and this one was this one, I know that this is the smallest because it's the biggest negative. So if I was to cut this into 12 equal pieces, and I'm not going to get there, but you're getting the idea, right? I would say that this would go about negative 1 and 4/12, about right here, right? So negative 1 and 4/12 would be first. And then negative 1 and 3/12 would be next, which would be about right there. Okay. The other two fractions we have is 1 and 3/5 and 5/4. Okay. So 1 and 3/5 and 5/4. Well, let's just use our calculator and see if we can get a decimal value for these. 1 and 3/5 is going to equal, as a decimal, fraction to a decimal is 1.6. And 5/4 as a decimal, when I do that, is 1.25. So 1.6 is bigger than that. So my next one is going to be 5/4. We want to write the original value down. And then the last one is 1 and 3/5. Okay? Long lesson today it is. All right, we have a couple more here. Okay? 10 and 11. All right? And we're going to continue our path. Sabrina is measuring different lengths of ribbon for a craft at the art camp. Which list shows the ribbons from greatest to least, biggest to smallest? Well, in this case, I clearly can see that the common denominator is going to be 16. So I know I'm going to rewrite all of these with a denominator of 16 times 2 times 2. I'm going to use my brain here a little bit. Times 4 times 4. The last one to get to 16 is times 8 times 8. So we want them biggest to smallest. Well, the biggest one is 3/4. Now I'm just comparing 2 because it has 3/4 and 3/4. This doesn't count anymore and that doesn't count. So the next biggest one is 5/8. That's 9/16. So clearly I see it's letter C. And I don't need to go any further. Okay. All right. Last one, number 11. The table shows the progress that the Harrison children have made on their reading app, which shows the progress of the children with the most completed to the least completed, the biggest to the smallest. Okay. So now I have a bunch of goofy fractions. So now I'm going to revert back to my decimals because to get a common denominator here, it's going to be enormous. All right, so let's just use our calculator and make them decimals. 21 over 25. And remember to switch that to a decimal. We hit second and over D, and there's what your calculator should look like. And if you hit enter, that equals what? 0.84. The next one, 17 n over D, 20. And we're going to change it to 0.85. Remember, biggest to smallest. And the last one is 5/6. 5 n over D, 6. And to get it to a decimal, I do the same thing. And that's a unique repeating decimal. You see, when we look at this, it has 83 hundredths with the 3 repeating. So those 3s are going to go over forever. So you're going to notice that I put a bar over that 3 when I wrote it. Okay. So the biggest one here is 17/20, 0.85, which is Mason. And then would be Margot, and then Marco. So it is letter A, or excuse me, letter B. All right. All right. Complicated lesson. We're doing a lot today. So I hope you had your calculator to help you and follow along. If you flip the page, your homework is going to be here on this page. It's going to be 1 to 7. Okay. Use your calculator. Take your time. Show your work. Don't get in a hurry. Have a great day.